Hi, everyone. This is Teresa Aker from Success Diaries with Teresa Aker. It is my pleasure today to bring you Irv. He's with Time Signatures with Jim Ervin on a podcast. How you doing today, Jim?
I'm doing great. I'm having a good time, and it's a wonderful day. We got some sunshine. It's bitter cold up here in Michigan, but it's actually a little sunny, believe it or not.
Well, guess what? It's bitter cold here too. You must have sent Michigan weather up to Canada.
Well, I don't know about sending it to you, but maybe you send it to us.
Yeah, that's a possibility too up here, you never know. So
Right.
I know I'm calling you Irv, and on
Sure.
your sign it says Time Signatures with Jim Ervin. So we're gonna
That is
ask 2
correct.
questions right
Sure.
off the bat. Why is the name Jim Ervin, and yet we call you Irv? And 2, how did you get started in podcasting?
So, okay, so let's go back several years. When I was in high school, I actually worked at the high school radio station, which was WCHW at Bay City Central High School in Bay City, Michigan. And I ended up getting into the broadcasting field. Never had an air name or a moniker to go by back then. But when I was up north, I lived up in the Cadillac area, and I went by the air name Jim Michaels, which in radio people often pick names for themselves. Okay, air names. When I came down to the Lansing area and started my family back in 1988. I got into radio down here. I was 89, 90, something like that before I finally got in. And they said, no, we've got a Rich Michaels in town. You can't be Jim Michaels, so you got to find something else. And I was digging around in my head trying to come up with something because my last name is Bates. I'm sorry. Jim Bates just doesn't cut it for radio, okay? So Norman Bates would have been a good one.
Oh, I like
Um,
that.
but I didn't think about that. So I thought, all right, my middle name is Ervin. I've always hated my middle name, but tie it together, Jim Ervin, it just flows. It just sounds good.
It does.
And the rest is history. I stuck with that air name. I've had it since 1991. And people would call me up at the station and say, "Hey, Irv, play me a song." So then that's where Irv came from, and just kind of stuck around.
I
But
love it.
Time Signatures podcast started off. I'm a member of the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan, and I've served on the board now for 4 years. I am their photographer. Um, that's how I got involved with the blues organization. And one evening when we were in a meeting, somebody said, we really miss having the radio show that we had. And wouldn't it be kind of cool to do something related to the organization again? And this little light popped on in my head because I had gotten away from broadcasting for several years. I had 3 children. I had mouths to feed, and radio just doesn't do it. Um, so I started driving truck, and believe it or not, and got away from radio. But radio has always been in the back of my mind because I've always been very inquisitive. My mom used to tell me, God rest her soul, that I should be doing interviews because I'm really good at it. And I've got so many questions. And so the opportunity presented itself. And I spoke with a gentleman who ended up being my producer, Dedalian Lowry, over at WLNZ at Lansing Community College here in Lansing. And he said, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to do a radio show? Do you want to do a podcast? And I said, I've done radio. I think I want to do a podcast. And then he tasked me with, all right, I want to know everything about it. What do you want to do? And so I just started thinking about the things that I wanted to do. And it was because of my inquisitive nature. I've become a bit of a historian in the blues. And I'm a huge fan of the blues genre of music in all varieties. Um, and I just wanted to go out and start talking to people and preserve those stories. And that's how we got where we are today. It's preserving the history of the blues, one story at a time. And that's my tagline.
That's
But
fantastic. I myself like to listen to the blues. Absolutely. I'm not an expert, but I love the sound. So it's
oh yeah.
wonderful that you're bringing it back. That's wonderful.
And you know, the funny thing is the blues has never had its own seat at the table. If you go back at the beginning, the blues was music that most widely talked about, you know, the trials and tribulations of Black America.
Sure. Sure.
Came from the Delta region originally. People like Buddy Guy and Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters, they all came from the South and came north. But it's never had its own seat. So I've always kind of been bummed because the blues, even though it hasn't had its own spot, has touched virtually every genre of music that exists today. And many of the musicians out there, even rock and roll musicians like the Rolling Stones, Ted Nugent, Bob Seger, they all have given accolades to the blues for their start in music. Jimi Hendrix is another great example. And so I feel like these stories, primarily the older guys and women, okay, because it's men and women that were involved in the blues back then, those stories need to be preserved. And along the way, hopefully I can help to engender a new generation of people that are interested in the blues in some form.
That's great. And, have you been able to bring some people today on your show and talk to them about their stories, or are you doing more research and bringing their music alive that way?
Oh no, no, I don't play music on my show at
Oh,
all.
you don't?
My
Okay, I didn't know that. I didn't
no,
know if you did or not.
no,
Okay.
my podcast is all about interviews and
Interviews.
stories.
Okay.
And I've had some of the biggest names in the blues on as guests so far, and it's
Nice.
we've been doing this for about 2 calendar years.
Oh, nice.
Um, but we are moving in. Our seasons are 6 months, so I'm going into season 4 right now. We just launched that a couple of weeks ago. But I've interviewed, for example, Joe Bonamassa, who
Oh, nice.
is the number one rated blues musician on the planet. He's got more number ones than anybody, including Buddy Guy, BB King, you name it. He's beaten them all.
I'm not an
Um,
expert, but I know that name. So, I
if you look,
mean,
there's a picture of him right up here on
ex
the wall
oh, very
that I
good.
took.
Very good. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but
Now, can I
I've
state the
talked.
obvious? Have you had the Blues Brothers on? Well, have you had Dan Aykroyd and Jim Belushi on?
I have
Just
not
wondering.
yet. I have not yet, but
Well,
I've
we'll
got
have to reach
friends.
out because they're Canadians and we have to reach out to them, right?
I have friends that are in Chicago that have ties. And the cool part about Jim Belushi and even Dan Aykroyd is occasionally they'll show up at blues venues like Buddy Guy's Legends and Fitzgerald's when they've got stuff going on. So I have some wants. I have some wish lists out there. Um, Most certainly Buddy Guy, who I have not interviewed yet.
Okay.
Um, but I did get a chance to interview Walter Trout, who has been around for decades and played with John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, and he played with Canned Heat. Um, he was very much into drugs and alcohol back in the day. One of the tremendous stories that I got Walter to tell me is his story about, first of all, the 3-day intervention that Carlos Santana did on him to help him get off of drugs and alcohol.
Yes.
And secondly, about his near-death experience where he was this close to being gone. And he ended up getting a liver transplant like my mom did. So we had a bit of a tie there. And so I've had some great opportunities to talk to some older members of the Blues Society, some of the younger members, and you know, people say, "Well, what do you do to keep motivated?" I love the music. I love asking questions, so there's no problem staying motivated for me.
Absolutely. And I could tell in your voice, wow, Irv, you're very passionate about it and you're bringing together something that is going, I know you're successful, but it's just going to keep going for you. I'm looking at all the
Thank you.
pictures out on your wall. Your studio, I must say, I have to comment, is
Sure.
amazing. Nice
Thank
studio.
you.
I like that.
Thank you.
And all the pictures up there. Tell us a few. Have you got, what have you got up there to see it from this angle? It's just, is there any pictures there that kind of resonate with you that are kind of close to your heart?
Oh yeah. Well, as I mentioned, I shot
Yes,
that photo of Joe Bonamassa. That was
yes.
at the Fox Theater in Detroit, November of 23. I've got an autographed poster of Buddy Guy, which is just off camera, unfortunately. We
Okay.
went to see his Damn Right Farewell tour in Grand Rapids, but I've got a poster that's autographed by a bunch of musicians from the King Biscuit Blues Festival in Helena, Arkansas.
Oh,
But
nice.
my newest the thing that I've been doing is collecting autographed CDs. And then I get these little 5x5 frames. Here's Carlos Santana. This is John Lee Hooker. I've got Mick Fleetwood from Fleetwood Mac. I have
Wow.
Pinetop Perkins over here. Um, between the posters from the blues festivals and the CDs, and the nice thing about this, I have about 30 of the CDs now, and I have several posters from concerts and festivals, and
Yeah.
I rotate them in and out. And then I have 11 by 17s that I rotate in and out on my wall behind me as well.
Oh, very
Um,
nice.
but the things that stay are the like the photo of BB King. I have an autograph of BB here from his 80th birthday tour, which is really cool. I have a washboard from Fred Reif, who played washboard in a band up in Bay City.
Oh, nice.
Just lots of really cool things. And then I have a couple local bands up here behind me, and
Oh,
you
nice.
can't see it, but I've got Jimi Hendrix up here next to Al Green,
Oh,
and
that's fantastic.
that was a photo that was taken by a gentleman that lives in Ann Arbor back in 1967 in August, just before I believe it was the Montreux Festival, just
Oh,
before
okay.
Jimmy broke out. So before Jimmy was really out there, he came to a place in Ann Arbor and did a gig there. And
Okay.
it's really cool stuff. It's a lot of fun.
You're doing amazing. So I'm looking at
Thank
your
you.
studio. You've got all the nostalgia there. You've got historic stories about it. Tell us some more that you've learned over the time. Tell us some more
Well,
stories.
the fun part about my podcast is you never know what you're going to get. Um, I actually did an episode, kind of tongue in cheek, the Liars Club or the Storytellers, and it was a bunch of musicians that I got together from the Greater Lansing area, all of whom had been playing in music, blues, some R&B, different stuff like that. And we're talking they've been at it for 30, 40 years, some even longer. And I just got them to sit at a table. And this was brought to me by the idea was brought to me by another musician that said, "Wouldn't it be cool if you could just sit down and start talking to these guys?" And before I know it, I was sitting there for 2 hours, and I got so many cool stories about. Well, for example, this one one guy, um, part of his pay when he was up north is that it would help cover his hotel room, but he ran a little bit short one time. And so he threw a rope out the window and lowered his stuff down out the window and went down and took off for Bay City to his next gig. And when he got there, the state police were there waiting for him, going, "Hey, you didn't pay your bill."
Oh my gosh, you're
This is
kidding.
Oh yeah, and we had another guy that plays drums, and he was talking about some of the gigs that he played where there were mob guys from New York in presence. Um, it just to me, anytime you give me a story like that, just give me a little hook. I'm going to grab it and run, and it gives me a dozen questions to ask. But um, I never get bored with the stories that I get told, and it seems like whenever I start thinking about, well, maybe I need to take a break or something like that, I'll get an opportunity to interview somebody else.
Oh,
And so,
absolutely.
as I said, my list right now, for once, there's quite a few people on it, including Eric Clapton.
Oh my
Um,
goodness. Oh, that
I
would
would
be good
love
too. Yeah.
to. Oh yeah, big time. The cool part about the interview with Eric, if I get it, I'm hoping and praying. When I
We are
did my
too. We
interview
want to
with
hear them. We want to get them on your show.
Yeah.
Eric, if
when
you're
I interviewed when I interviewed Joe Bonamassa, if you know anything about his story, before he broke out, he and his manager and his producer got together and literally put their houses up as collateral and spent $250,000 and rented the Royal Albert Hall in London, okay, in 2009. Joe decided that he was going to reach out because he had the means to reach out to Eric and invite him to come and play one song at the Royal Albert Hall. And so Eric emailed him back and accepted, and they ended up doing the song further on down the road together. That really put the stamp and the seal of approval on Joe Bonamassa's career. And 15, 16 years later, you look at where he's at now. I mean,
Oh,
he sells out everything. And so when I had the opportunity to interview him, he doesn't like to be interviewed with the same type of questions all the time.
okay.
Everybody that knows anything about Joe knows that he opened for BB King at the age of 12 because he was a guitar prodigy. Okay. I didn't ask him that. My first question that had any meat on the bone to him was when you were standing on the stage that night at Royal Albert Hall and you looked over and saw Eric coming out of the shadows, what was going through your mind?
Great question. I love it.
And
What a good
and
question.
he loved it. And he said, I couldn't believe it was happening. I sent him a letter. I sent him a letter.
You're right.
And here he is.
Right.
And I'm like, that's the kind of stuff that I like going for. I don't just like to dig into the same old, because there's so many stories that you can get through people if you dig around a little bit and look for things. And so
Absolutely. And
that's
musicians went through times, well, all musicians go through times where they're competitive. It's hard while you're going through it. We all see the successes, but we don't see the work involved and the time involved and the scary moments. As you said, people are put up their house to do things.
exactly.
People slept in vans to try to get their
Oh
music
yeah.
out there because they were passionate about it and they loved it and no one understands what they went through. So those stories are so important because as we look at, as you said, it just takes one break. Someone who reaches out and says, let me help you. And someone who's talented is going to go so far and they're going to
Yep.
reach out to someone else and help them. And
Yes.
that's what makes it all kind of go around. Does that make sense to you, Irv, that way?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, and
100%.
even
And
yourself, you're helping everyone because there may be some new people up and coming that are interested in the blues, and they may come to you and say, gee, Irv, I just love for you to hear my story, and maybe there's some connections there.
well, so one of the things that I do, Teresa, is I don't just do my regular episodes.
Okay,
I also do what I call um, promotional content episodes
okay,
and exclusive content episodes. And an example of an exclusive content episode is when I interviewed Fred Reif up in Bay City. Um, this guy talked for an hour. And at first, I was kind of bummed because I didn't get to ask him a question for the first 20 minutes. Okay. But he had so much to say and so much history to share. And the guy's written two great books about the blues. Um, and I sat back and thought about it after I did the interview, and I started feeling bad for being upset and being kind of frustrated about it. And I called him up and I said, you know what, Fred? I said, I'd like to have you on again. I know you got more because we only got into the early 70s and we started in the 50s. And I want to talk and get more from you. And I said, we're going to do it the same way we did it last time. I'm just going to cut you loose, kind of like you're doing with me today.
yeah,
As long as there's conversation, we're good. If he starts, taking a little break, I'll jump in with a question. And I've got 2 solid hours of this guy sharing his stories and the history of Lazy Lester and Boogie Woogie Red and Dr. Ross, the harmonica boss. I mean, these are all guys that played back in the day and back in the 60s and early 70s, and they're all gone now.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
I look at these opportunities when I do an episode like that. I don't want to cut it down to 30 minutes. I don't want to cut it into 4 pieces. I want to leave it alone.
Mhm,
Okay? I'm going to leave it alone.
mhm.
So that is an example of an exclusive content episode where I just put it up and go, there it is. It's only going to be on YouTube. So it is exclusive.
Yeah,
It is not going to be on the radio side.
right.
And people really love it because they can start, they can end it, they can come back to it. And, most people don't have the capacity for doing an hour straight, okay, for listening to an hour straight or watching an hour straight. But they can come back to it if they want to. And that's one of the things that we do. Um, Promotional content episodes. A good example is I've got a very good friend, Sunny Blue and the Moons, over in the southeastern lower Michigan area.
Okay.
She's getting ready to launch her fourth album,
Oh, nice.
and they've decided that they're going to do a Women in the Blues showcase down in Westland, Michigan at the Token Lounge. And I am humbly honored to announce that I am actually going to be serving as MC for that event. But
Congratulations.
thank you. Actually went out and got suits. I bought suits.
You're gonna wear
So,
a suit, Irv?
oh yeah,
Oh,
yeah, it's
yeah.
blue. It's gorgeous. If you
Yeah.
get a chance to look at my Facebook, you'll see it.
Oh, I'm
I
going
guarantee
there. We're
you.
all going there, Irv. We want to see this.
Yeah. But I love doing
You know this
interviews
is
with
being
people.
recorded, right, Irv? And
Oh
you're going
yeah.
on social
Yep.
media, so
Yep.
everyone's gonna be looking.
And you have my permission. You can put all of it out there. I don't care. That's all right. But I love doing those interviews where somebody's got an album coming out and they want to get the word out. They want
Yeah,
to promote it in advance of the release.
yeah,
They come to me, we record it, they give me an advance copy so I can listen to it. Because one of the things that I like to do in preparation for an interview, especially with musicians, is I immerse myself in their music. I want to listen, I want to get a feel for who they are
yeah,
and for what they're bringing to the table. And I don't share. I just use that as an opportunity for me to, feed the mind a little bit and help come up with questions. So that's a promotional content episode.
sure.
But while we're on the subject of albums, I would like to say one thing because I have become, if you get a chance to look at the interviews that I do, on my back wall are logos for various organizations.
Okay.
Um, these organizations are 501c3 nonprofits. I'm sponsoring them. I'm not paying them, but I'm putting their logo with their permission on my page and I'm promoting them because there's several organizations that are very, very worthwhile that people need to support, like the National Women in the Blues, for example. Another one that we have on the page is the Killer Blues Headstone Project. A gentleman by the name of Steven Salter over in West Michigan
Okay.
started this business, 15 years ago, 501c3. He has placed 165 headstones, I believe, in 16 states. I mean, and this is from donations that people make, but he finds musicians who are buried in unmarked graves, blues musicians, and buys a headstone with the permission of the family if possible, and he places the headstone on their grave so it's no longer
That's
unmarked.
amazing.
Isn't that something?
Irv,
And
that's
so
amazing.
when I get to work with people like this and organizations, and Joe Bonamassa's organization is another one, the Keeping the Blues Alive, KTBA. Um, this guy has single-handedly helped kickstart and restart musicians' careers like Larry McRae, Joanna Connor, um, John. Name just left me. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Something. Anyway, he's done this for several musicians, and it's really cool to see the things that he has done during COVID when they were coming out of COVID. He was sending through the KTBA $1,500 checks called it was for the Fueling Musicians program, sending $1,500 checks to these musicians to help get them back out there. I mean,
Isn't that something?
yeah. And people said, "Well, why do you do it?" And he said, "Because I can."
Yeah, because he can. And
Here's
that's it's all
here's
what goes around comes around, doesn't it, Irv?
Yeah.
And
Oh,
as you're
absolutely.
doing such a great thing for those organizations because I also support organizations wherever I can and whenever I can. And it's so important because even what you're doing here, even what you're doing here, you're bringing the blues like that's it's beautiful music. You're bringing those artists bringing their stories forward, but new artists, you're giving back in that way, and you're helping with the nonprofit. That's
Yep.
that's great, and that's what life's all about, and as you know, other people have done the same thing, so it makes the world go round. I think that's what's, so amazing about podcasts, because we get to bring other people's stories forward, and all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, I never thought of that," and then they start doing it,
Yes.
right?
It's called paying it forward,
You
and
got it.
I'm a strong believer in paying it forward. A young lady by the name of Joss Riome just won the International Blues Competition, which is literally held every year in Memphis, Tennessee. And
Oh,
people from around the world converge on Memphis to see who's the best of the best. And she won the solo duo category.
fantastic.
Um, so
Now we're all
I
gonna be
grabbed a hold of
watching for
her.
it next year.
Yeah. Oh, well, this episode is actually going to be airing on Tuesday, tomorrow.
Okay,
It'll
okay.
be airing tomorrow. But Joss was she was such a pleasure to have on the show, and so excited about the prospects of a career that she didn't even think she had going for her, were it not for somebody recommending, hey, you should go try out for this and go compete. Because all of these people that come to Memphis,
Sure.
they have to come through a blues organization in the country or in the world, and these organizations have competitions, and you have to win that competition to get sent to Memphis. And so you get literally the best of the best that show up there. Um, but I wanted to touch on something real quick, because a
Go
lot
ahead.
of people, a lot of musicians are really struggling because you can pick up your phone and you can stream anything you want for free.
Yes.
There's no honor in it.
No.
This is something else that I've taken on as a little bit of a challenge to myself and my friends, um, because it takes 1,500 streams of a song or an album to equal one purchase. An album that costs $15, $20, whether it's CD or vinyl, you have to stream 1,500 songs to equal one purchase.
Okay.
I personally consider it a moral imperative, especially as a podcast owner, a host, that I make sure that I buy an album from these people. Oh, no, I'll send it to you. No, you won't. I'd love to have it signed so I can put it on my wall,
Mhm.
but I want to buy it because I understand that it takes 1,500 streams to equal one sale.
That's the
So
first
every
I've
time
heard
I
of
can,
that today from you,
yeah.
Herb, so now my audience knows that too.
And it's so unfortunate, that's why Joe Bonamassa did what he did. I mean, he does his own stuff. He does his own promotions. He's got his own record label. He's got, partnerships that he's got with recording studios. He's not tied to a particular label. And I'm not saying that they're all the devil or anything like that,
No, no,
but people need to understand the value of buying that CD. And I know cars don't come with CD players most of the time anymore.
no, that's
Vinyl's
true.
making a resurgence. Okay. Um, I've got a little stack of vinyl right here. This is just a part of my nearly 400 pieces that I've amassed over the last 8 months, 9 months.
And there's nothing like
Because
vinyl on a record
oh,
player. I mean,
I have a
listen, Herb, I've got records way back from my grandparents. So let me
oh
tell
yeah,
you, I have Herb, Albert, and Tina Brass. Let me tell
there
you,
you go.
I love albums and the sounds are so the blues is just beautiful on a record.
Oh, it's amazing, and I'm finding little record shops popping up, and I found this place over in Williamston, which is like 20 minutes from me. It's got it's called Vintage Sound, and they've got like guitars, amplifiers, but they also have stereo components. And then you go in the back room, and there's this little honey hole of vinyl and CDs, and I can't walk in there and not drop $100.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, I just can't.
yeah,
Um, but to me, being a supporter, and I buy vinyl if the artist has vinyl, I'll buy vinyl and a CD.
yeah,
A
yeah.
lot of times I'll get them both signed and then I'll give the CD away. I'm paying it forward. I'm trying to get more people into their music.
Right, right.
Um, but I think that we have a responsibility if we want to see live music continue. we need to support it. And so that's one of the things that I pride myself in. I am a huge supporter of live music. Um, being a photographer, I've been fortunate and blessed to shoot Buddy Guy at the Kalamazoo State Theater last August. I shot Joe, of course,
Yeah,
shot Warren Haynes last summer in Grand Rapids. So I'm starting to be able to get press passes because I'm recognized as a member of the press now. And I always
excellent.
make sure that they get a copy that they can do with what they wish. And so it kind of brings everything full circle around my podcast that not only do I shoot the photos, and I'd like to think
Nice.
that I do pretty good at it, but I also interview the artist, and it's a blast, man.
So, Herb, let me ask you this as we're doing this
Sure.
nice talk show together.
Yeah.
Let's help some up and coming blues singers. Is there someone that you know is coming up that is perhaps not out there yet, like, or is out there, but isn't quite there yet? Is there anyone we can help that we can mention their names? Just wondering
Well,
that you can
Joss
think of.
Riom, who
Yeah, you
lives
said that.
up in, I want to say, it's up north of Maine, in like Prince Edward Island area. She's way
Okay.
east up there in Canada.
Up my way.
Um, Yeah. Sunny Blue and the Moons, who I mentioned.
Yeah.
Um, big time. A gentleman by the name of Justin Deason,
Justin
Deason.
Beeson.
Justin Deason. Yep.
Okay.
He's another young up and comer.
Good.
There's Matthias Latine. As a matter of fact, I think the poster hanging right there behind me over my left shoulder, that's Matthias Latine. I got to see him. He's from Houston.
Okay.
He won the IBC a couple of years ago, and I
Nice.
got to see him last December over in Grand Rapids. I shot some photos and had him sign my poster, him and his band. And I told him, I said, when you come to Michigan, buddy, I will come and find you because I want to see you.
Nice.
Um, but I have a good time supporting these artists any way I can,
Yeah,
just trying to
and
get
that's
their
what it's
names
all
out there.
about.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I encourage it also. You're boy, you're right in there helping them all. Herb, I've had a great time talking to you today. I have another question for you. Would you come back and talk
Sure.
to us again?
Oh, absolutely. Anytime.
Good.
Anytime.
So the name of your podcast is Time Signatures with Jim Ervin.
Yes.
You
Yeah,
are
and when let me tell you, that was one piece I promised you I would tell you during the interview. You can't just search time signatures because that is a musical term.
Thank
That
you.
is the time of a song. So if you just put time signatures in, you're going to get this whole big stack of stuff on YouTube or Google or wherever. You have to go to YouTube and put in time signatures with Jim Ervin, Ervin, just like you see here, and it will take you to my channel.
Thank you for
Um,
sharing that. We need to know that so that people go to
oh
the right
yeah,
spot.
yeah, because I'd love to have as many people as want to come in and subscribe. Like you, I'm trying to build my audience,
Yeah.
and
And we
my
support each
goal
other.
is.
And
Oh
our
yeah,
audience supports us so that we can bring the content and keep going. So that's
yep.
important. And so if you're going to Jim's podcast, and I know you will, and the YouTube channels, when you subscribe, it really does make a big difference for everyone. And it all goes around. So thank you so much. Uh,
And it's free too.
and
It
it's
doesn't cost you a dime.
Absolutely. So, Irv, thank you for today. We
Thank you.
definitely want to have you back. Anyone who wants to reach out to Irv, I'm going to make sure that his bio information is down here. You can also reach out to him anytime. And if you have any blues questions, certainly reach out to Irv. He's the expert here. And I am so thrilled you'll come back, Irv. Thank you so much for today. My name's
Well,
Teresa
Teresa,
Aker. I'm with Success Diaries with Teresa Aker. I hope you're all having a great day, and I look forward to talking to you all very soon. Bye-bye now.